Third meditation, in which the attempt is made to form an idea of clairvoyant cognition of the elemental world. When we have perceptions by means of the elemental body and not through the physical senses, we experience a world that remains unknown to perception of the senses and to ordinary intellectual thinking. If we wish to compare this world with something belonging to ordinary life, we shall find nothing more appropriate than the world of memory. Just as recollections emerge from the innermost soul, so also do the supersensible experiences of the elemental body. In the case of a memory picture, the soul knows that it is related to an earlier experience in the world of the senses. In a similar way, the supersensible conception implies a relation. Just as the recollection by its very nature presents itself as something which cannot be described as a mere picture of the imagination, so does also the supersensible conception. The latter wrests itself from the soul's experience, but manifests itself immediately as an inner experience that is related to something external. It is by means of recollection that the past experience becomes present to the soul. But it is by means of a supersensible conception that something, which at some time can be found somewhere in the supersensible world, becomes an inner experience of the soul. The very nature of supersensible conceptions impresses upon our mind that they are to be looked upon as communications from a supersensible world, manifesting within the soul. How far we get in this way with our experiences in the supersensible world depends upon the amount of energy we apply to the strengthening of the life of our soul. The attainment of the conviction that the plant is not merely that which we perceive in the world of the senses, as well as the attainment of such a conviction with regard to the whole earth, belongs to the same sphere of supersensible experience. If anyone who has acquired the faculty of perception when outside his physical body looks at a plant, he will be able to perceive, besides what his senses are showing him, a delicate form which permeates the whole plant. This form presents itself as an entity of force, and he is brought to consider this entity as that which builds up the plant from the materials and forces of the physical world, and which brings about the circulation of the sap. He may say, employing an available, although not an altogether appropriate simile, that there is something in the plant which sets the sap in motion in the same way as that in which his own soul moves his arm. He looks upon something internal in the plant, and he must allow a certain independence to this inner principle of the plant in its relation to that part which is perceived by the senses. He must also admit that this inner principle existed before the physical plant existed. Then, if he continues to observe how a plant grows, withers, and produces seeds, and how new plants grow out of these, he will find the supersensible form of energy especially powerful when he observes these seeds. At this period, the physical being is insignificant in a certain respect, whereas the supersensible entity is highly differentiated and contains everything that, from the supersensible world, contributes to the growth of the plant. Now, in the same way, by supersensible observation of the whole earth, we discover an entity of force which we can know with absolute certainty existed before everything came into being, which is perceptible by the senses upon and within the earth. In this way, we arrive at an experience of the presence of those supersensible forces which cooperated in forming and developing the earth in the past. What is thus experienced we may just as well call the etheric or elemental basic entities or bodies of the plant and of the earth, as we call the body through which we gain perception when outside the body, our own elemental or etheric body. Even when we first begin to be able to observe in a supersensible way, we can assign elemental basic entities of this kind to certain things and processes apart from their ordinary qualities which are perceptible in the world of the senses. We are able to speak of an etheric body belonging to the plant or to the earth. However, the elemental beings observed in this way are not by any means the only ones which reveal themselves to supersensible experience. We characterize the elemental body of a plant by saying that it builds up a form from the materials and forces of the physical world, and thereby manifests its life in a physical body. But we may also observe beings that lead an elemental existence without manifesting their life in a physical body. Thus, entities that are purely elemental are revealed to supersensible observation. It is not merely that we experience an addition, as it were, to the physical world. We experience another world in which the world of the senses presents itself as something which may be compared to pieces of ice floating about in water. A man who could only see the ice and not the water might quite possibly ascribe reality to the ice only and not to the water. Similarly, if we take into account only that which manifests itself to the senses, we may deny the existence of the supersensible world, of which the world of the senses is in reality a part, just as the floating pieces of ice are part of the water in which they are floating. Now we shall find that those who are able to make supersensible observations describe what they behold by making use of expressions borrowed from the perceptions of sense. Thus we may find the elemental body of a being in the world of the senses, or that of a purely elemental being, described as manifesting itself as a self-contained body of light and having manifold colors. These colors flash forth, glow, or shine, and it appears that these phenomena of light and color are the manifestation of its life. But that of which the observer is really speaking is altogether invisible, and he is perfectly aware that the light or color picture which he gives has no more to do with that which he actually perceives than, for instance, the writing in which a fact is communicated has to do with the fact itself. And yet the supersensible experience has not been expressed through arbitrarily chosen perceptions of the senses. The picture seen is actually before the observer and is similar to an impression of the senses. This is so because during supersensible experiences, liberation from the physical body is not complete. The physical body is still connected with the elemental body and brings the supersensible experience in a form drawn from the sense world. Thus, the description given of an elemental being is given in the form of a visionary or fanciful combination of sense impressions. But in spite of this, it is, when given in this manner, a true rendering of what has been experienced. For we have really seen what we are describing. The mistake that may be made is not in describing the vision as such, but in taking the vision for the reality, instead of that to which the vision points, namely, the reality underlying it. A man who has never seen colors, a man born blind, will not, when he attains to the corresponding faculty of perception, describe elemental beings in such a way as to speak of flashing colors. He will make use of expressions familiar to him. To people, however, who are able to see physically, it is quite appropriate when they, in their description, make use of some such expression as the flashing forth of a color form. By its aid, they can give an impression of what has been seen by the observer of the elemental world. And this holds good not only for communications made by a clairvoyant, that is to say, one who is able to perceive by the aid of his elemental body, to a non-clairvoyant, but also for the intercommunication between clairvoyants themselves. In the world of the senses, man lives in his physical body, and this body clothes the supersensible observations in forms perceptible to the senses. Therefore, the expression of supersensible observations by making use of the sense pictures they produce is, in ordinary Earth life, a useful means of communication. The point is that anyone receiving communication experiences in his soul something bearing the right relation to the fact in question. Indeed, the pictures are only communicated in order to call forth an experience. Such as they really are, they cannot be found in the outer world. That is their characteristic and also the reason why they call forth experiences that have no relation to anything material. At the beginning of his clairvoyance, the pupil will find it difficult to become independent of the sense picture. When his faculty becomes more developed, however, a craving will arise for inventing more arbitrary means of communicating what has been seen. These will involve the necessity for explaining the signs which he uses. The more the exigencies of our time demand the general diffusion of supersensible knowledge, the greater will be the necessity for clothing such knowledge in the expressions used in everyday life on the physical plane. Now, at certain times, supersensible experiences may come upon the pupil of themselves, and he has then the opportunity of learning something about the supersensible world by personal experience, according as he is more or less often favored, as we may say, by that world through its shining into the ordinary life of his soul. A higher faculty, however, is that of calling forth at will clairvoyant perception from the soul life. The path to the attainment of this faculty results ordinarily from energetic continuation of the inner strengthening of the soul life, but much also depends upon establishing a certain keynote in the soul. A calm, unruffled attitude of mind is necessary in regard to the supersensible world, an attitude which is as far removed on the one hand from the burning desire to experience the most possible in the clearest possible manner, as it is from a personal lack of interest in that world. Burning desire has the effect of diffusing something like an invisible mist before the clairvoyant sight, whilst lack of interest acts in such a way that though the supersensible facts really do manifest themselves, they are simply not noticed. This lack of interest shows itself now and then in a very peculiar form. There are persons who honestly wish for supersensible experiences, but they form a priori a certain definite idea of what these experiences should be in order to be acknowledged as real. Then, when the real experiences arrive, they flit by without being met by any interest, just because they are not such as one has imagined that they ought to be. In the case of voluntarily produced clairvoyance, there comes a moment in the course of the soul's inner activity when we know, now my soul is experiencing something that it never experienced before. The experience is not a definite one, but a general feeling that we are not confronting the outer world of the senses, nor are we within it, nor yet are we within ourselves, as in the ordinary life of the soul. The outer and inner experiences melt into one, into a feeling of life hitherto unknown to the soul, concerning which, however, the soul knows that it could not be felt if it were only living within the outer world by means of the senses, or by its ordinary feelings and recollections. We feel, moreover, that during this condition of the soul, something is penetrating into it from a world hitherto unknown. We cannot, however, arrive at a conception of this unknown something. We have the experience, but can form no idea of it. Now we shall find that when we have such an experience, we get a feeling as if there were a hindrance in our physical bodies, preventing us from forming a conception of that which is penetrating into the soul. If, however, we continue the inner efforts of our soul, we shall, after a while, feel that we have overcome our own corporeal resistance. The physical apparatus of the intellect hath hitherto only been able to form ideas in connection with experiences in the world of the senses. It is at the outset incapable of raising to a picture that which wants to manifest itself from out of the supersensible world. It must first be so prepared as to be able to do this, in the same way as a child is surrounded by the outer world, but has to have his intellectual apparatus prepared by experiences in that world, before he is able to form ideas of his surroundings. So is mankind in general unable to form an idea of the supersensible world. The clairvoyant who wishes to make progress prepares his own apparatus for forming ideas so that it will work on a higher level in exactly the same way as that of a child is prepared to work in the world of the senses. He makes his strengthened thoughts work upon this apparatus, and as a consequence, the latter is by degrees remodeled. He becomes capable of including the supersensible world in the realm of his ideas. Thus, we feel how through the activity of the soul, we can influence and remodel our own body. In the beginning, the body acts as a strong counterpose to the life of the soul. We feel it as a foreign body within us. But presently we notice how it always adapts itself increasingly to the experiences of the soul, until, finally, we do not feel it anymore at all, but find before us the supersensible world, just as we do not notice the existence of the eye with which we look upon the world of colors. The body then must become imperceptible before the soul can behold the supersensible world. When we have in this way deliberately arrived at making the soul clairvoyant, we shall, as a rule, be able to reproduce this state at will if we concentrate upon some thought that we are able to experience within ourselves in a specially powerful manner. As a consequence of surrendering ourselves to such a thought, we shall find that clairvoyance is brought about. At first, we shall not be able to see anything definite which we especially wish to see. Supersensible things or happenings for which we are in no way prepared or desire to call forth will play into the life of the soul. Yet, by continuing our inner efforts, we shall also attain to the faculty of directing the spiritual eye to such things as we wish to investigate. When we have forgotten an experience, we try to bring it back to our memory by recalling to the mind something connected with the experience. And in the same way, we may as clairvoyants start from an experience which we may rightly think is connected with what we want to find. In surrendering ourselves with intensity to the known experience, we shall often after a longer or shorter lapse of time find added to it that experience which it was our object to attain. In general, however, it is to be noted that it is of the very greatest importance for the clairvoyant quietly to wait for the propitious moment. We should not desire to attract anything. If a desired experience does not arrive, it is best to give up the search for a while and to try to get an opportunity another time. The human apparatus of cognition needs to develop calmly up to the level of certain experiences. If we have not the patience to await such development, we shall make incorrect or inaccurate observations.